You're back. Good. What can I help you with? More lessons in basic reality? My favorite part of the day. Go ahead, ask me anything. We're in Martinez, baby. A casual term of endearment popular among the 50-plus crowd. It's a disco holdover, pay it no heed. Aren't we all?
She refers to your corresponding ages.
Martinez is a district of Revachol. A very small district tucked away near the industrial harbour. North of the 881 and Jamrock. You would be excused for not knowing about it. Unimportant, they say. Forgotten, even. Shelled to smithereens during the Revolution. It has its charms, just not this time of year. I'm not a good ambassador. I've only been here once before, as a teenager. Not a lot has changed. There are ruins, a terminal, fishing boats, reeds, boys with boxy shoulders.
A brief spike of longing in her upright body. The dots under her eyelids shake.
This place used to be a province. A workers' resort before the city swallowed it and the artillery did its work. The reeds are the real star of the show here now. The further down the coast, the wilder it gets. Yes, I was slumming it with some girlfriends of mine. We had boats and... Don't hold it against me. The boys certainly did not.
There's a spark in the air, a live wire hanging in the wind, in your hungover neocortex. Then the sea air cools it down.
It's not really a sea, it's the Bay of Revachol. And the bay feeds into the ocean. Yes, we're on an island in an ocean, the world's largest body of water, the Insulindic.
Known to the early Revacholians as Les Immensités Bleues, the blue immensities, vast, lukewarm and unknowable, flowing in and out of sight.
Caillou, as you already know. Imagine a pebble. A smoothed-over pebble amidst a great blue sea, misshapen, cracked. The cracks are the River Esperance. We're in the delta of this river, on the 6th branch, the Martinez distributary.
It is clear this pebble is of enormous value to her, and to humanity at large.
Revachol? Revachol is what you call a city. The great kind.
As if it's self-explanatory, beyond patriotism, a fact.
History detective. They built this city to resolve history. Our part in it, at least. Our centuries. The nations of the Occident, or migrant workers from Seminine and Ile Marat, depending on your creed. In the DeLorean century, 380 years ago. They say it's where the terrible questions of our time will be answered. The tensions are highest, the fault lines deepest. By that I mean conflicts. Ideological conflicts. The stuff of men. We are standing on a fertile, self-sufficient island able to sustain up to 200 million people in the middle of the Insulindic Ocean, the world's connective tissue. It's where the money is. I think it's fair to say so. Martinez is about...
A sparkle of lights on the horizon, like evening stars above the curvature of the planet.
22 kilometers from the center of the world. That soldering iron is the bank of the world building. The bottom floors are Insiacom. Coalition government, Insulindian Mission Command.
Silence. She lowers her hand. The water, the light. It's as though you're seeing it for the first time. There is no recognition, only the immensity of the sea and the cold radiating from it. She observes your eyes scanning the horizon, then breaks the silence, slowly. This is one thought you need to complete. Where are you?
Was there something else you wanted to know? I remember something about a lowdown. These are unimportant times, Detective. You and I were born after the dust had settled. 1,000th of a second too late. For the big time.
The smile of a predator. No doubt what she's got in mind.
All men are predators, dear. Nothing much to be done about that. It's all a matter of where you get to file your teeth. The revolution. It's quite easy. Every 100 years or so, our species gets together to decide what's next, who gets shot in the head, and who gets the mineral rights. It's a real kerfuffle. Why, of course. We're talking Duke out Central. Full swing intra-species warfare. No, I would say the apes were neutral. I don't know about that.
No, the tiny apes are doing all they can to be better. It's not their fault. It takes time for the apes to change and work. Perhaps what happened here was part of that time and part of that work. The apes will never change. They are all evil. End of discussion.
Those would be the communists. Generally speaking, 40 million people got shot in the head during the World Revolution. But the communists, they all got shot in the head.
She's not gloating. It's a relieved celebration.
Oh, and the anarchists too. They shot them well. So well, one forgets they even existed.
She likes the totality of it.
Indeed. They piled them in mass graves in Ozon. And, well, that's the last anyone heard of those people. Did they ever? Before they got shot themselves, they shot 2 million people. Yes, the Red Deluge. The Insulindian Deluge, they call it. Oh, lots of people. Even the king got shot in the head, or thrown beneath a horse, or drowned. Accounts differ. It was unceremonious. Just as well, he wasn't actually the king. Just the king's nephew. The real king abdicated and lived out a long and productive life as a venture capitalist in Grad. I prefer the term risk-averse. King Guillaume was nobody's fool. He could smell a PR disaster brewing. So he got out alive, and his nephew Fricelle got shot in his place. Him and tens of thousands of his wonderfully fascist kingsmen. It was a wild time. The liberals got the mineral rights. And by mineral rights, I mean everything. Liberals are usually middle-class people, Detective. Or the remaining gentry. The beneficiaries of the pre-revolutionary arrangement. Some were rich enough to stay with the Constitution, with monarchy. Big mistake. Others bet on the revolution. They were called the ultras, or ultra-liberals. They fared well. They didn't win so much as survive. We were the last ones standing when the war ended. Everyone else got shot in the head, remember?
We. She's one of them. Of course.
To foreign intervention. The coalition. Those people really took the mineral rights. The liberals took everything that wasn't nailed to the ground. The coalition took the ground. The ocean, the laws, and the people. The coalition of nations. Grad, Mesk, Vesper, Messina, Oranje, and Sur-la-Clay. The armed center of the world. They landed here and ended the revolution. It was the moralist thing to do.
There is bitterness in her voice, tempered with understanding. She is critical, but ultimately understands the cause.
The moralists believe in keeping everything exactly the way it is. They believe in mineral rights, and not shooting people in the head. At least not in the same manner and volume as the others do. They are the long-standing provisional rulers of Revachol now, the coalition government.
The rulers of Revachol, and also the world. These guys are strong.
This is their zone of control. They embolden the RCM with crumbs of the same law they took. Technically speaking, you are a moralist.
The color of moralism is blue. The official motto of Moral Intern, or Moralist International, is a blue forget-me-not, a piece of grey sky. Unofficial. For a moment, there was hope.
Of course. Not easy to be moderate about head shooting in your line of work.
Rooty tooty, pointy shooty.
That's the way of history. The turn of the century revolution? Don't answer it. It's a trick question. The revolution began in '02 on the Isla of Grad, though by the end nearly the whole world had gotten involved. It wasn't a who, but a what. A pandemic of Zarat, a particularly virulent prion disease, which the authorities in Grad proved unable to contain. Then Marzolf came along and overthrew the government. It made people overthrow their governments. Of course not. It was a highly infectious microorganism that destroyed brain tissue. The actual causes of the revolution were material. The pandemic only provided the spark.
It was a funny time in history. They discovered transistors and rock music, but they didn't know anything about prions. Nobody did.
From Revachol and Grad? Not far. The world managed to cauterize itself. Marzolf's government was overthrown in '08, and the coalition crushed the Revachol commune 2 years later. It was the end. Why? You and I, officer. Our lives in the zone of control.
Something tells you her life and yours are not that similar. Maybe it's because she has a boat and you have that necktie? A pair of pants?
No doubt. But we share the same time and position on the planet's crust. That counts for more than you think. A city-state divided into free market zones under the everlasting interregnum of the Coalition of Nations. And you, of course, the citizens' militia.
The clatter of typewriter keys fills the main hall of the reappropriated silk mill. Precinct 41. Chad Tilbrook presses enter. Outside, Officer Elfboy Williams slams the door of an armored motor carriage.
The zone of control is the third incarnation of Revachol, after the failure of the suzerain and the commune. Modernity. They developed the marvels of the inter-eastlery communication. Telematic milieus, radiation, colored plastics. Meanwhile, in Revachol West, the aftermath continues for the 5th decade.
51 minus 8 equals 43.
Time flies. The 20s saw a decade of urban war, west of the river leveled, offshore platforms in flames. Still, it's regarded as an improvement on what came before. '08 to '19 was simply hell. The 30s? Things settled down in the 30s. Revachol East transformed itself into the world's largest tax haven, with the international community's blessing. For the first time in a long time, it seemed like things were going somewhere.
Then you happened. Your youth in the 30s. All that untaxed income must have fueled the new. That can only mean one thing.
Yes, and quantitative easing. It was a market mirage, unfortunately. The 40s dispelled it. An Isla-wide hangover, you might say. So, here we are. Welcome to reality, baby.
From the looks of it, the 50s haven't been much better for the zone of control. You can see it in her eyes. Days slipping away.
I've no right to be dissatisfied. This shirt is Barbara Muscova, this raincoat is impervious to rain and is guaranteed for 100 years. My daughters will wear it. No, it's just... we could have had so much more. Every one of us. If only we played it right. Good question. What would you have done differently?
No, her first.
And I asked you, past-less detective of the Citizens Militia, what insight has acute encephalopathy given to you?
Here's some wisdom, lady. Say the death thing.
Then you would have died, most likely. Not far from here. Maybe even right here, during the beachhead, defending the coast the day the Coalition took the city.
The cold runs down your spine. She gestures toward the waters. The wind stops. There is silence on the dark water of the Martinez Inlet. A dog barks. A gunshot echoes off the walls of some distant building.
Then you would have died fighting against them. Long before the beachhead. Our time is a shadow cast by that day. They are what they are. Who knows? An afterbloom may yet come. Anyway, enough sentimentality. Is there anything else you want to know?
Not so fast. Who is she in all this? Ask her who she is. She owes you an answer. She won't maneuver her way out of this one.
I am the vilest of the vile. A traitor. A devourer of nations and infants. I am an ultra.
She raises the corner of her mouth, smirking, revealing a canine. It's sharp.
An ultra-liberal. It's a type of liberal. From the revolution. It's, not the moderate kind. Haven't you heard? I am a nether creature of the Forbidden Swamp. One of those who pushed the king under a shit wagon and betrayed the revolution. We surrendered the nation to financial colonists. No saint person identifies as an ultra anymore. Not in broad daylight. Tell me, now that I've uncoiled myself, are you repulsed?
In her green eyes you see a mixture of truth and self-satire. Decades of guilt and pride. Forgive her, but only because you like pearlescent teeth and those light green eyes.
I do hope so. I hope we are able to remain collegial despite my monstrousness. The Ultras didn't have anything against the king, or the commune, you see. It was just business. When the dust settled, the Liberals were the only ones left to clean up the mess. By virtue of their survival, they were handed enormous power to shape the future. This was all our last generation managed. With due respect to our overlords, the eternal caretaker government that keeps Martinez a monument to the efficacy of its artillery.
An appropriate warning to those who'd cross the line and pull the city into madness once more. While a gentle wind sweeps the streets in the rebuilt east, light drizzle washing it clean, lights go up and motor carriages circulate the tracks.
I would not have relinquished sovereignty to the Coalition. Not here in Martinez, and not in the Stella Maris or Delta Beachheads either. If not for my own sake.
She realizes her small, cold fists are clenched. She loosens them.
Then for my daughters. We had an obligation to defend our sovereignty. We should have burned the whole Isola down rather than let them have it.
Dark orange flames reflect in her green eyes. An oil fire on the ocean.
Yes. Whatever else I am, I'm also a mother. And a wife. Now, shall we return to reality? A bird? A sphenicid? A flightless bird of the polar regions? Of course you're not, my dear. I'm just terrible at guessing games. Ah. This is the pier of Rue des Saint-Ghislain, 33A, where the tenants have been kind enough to rent me a slot. Or two. A pre-revolutionary tenement. Old buildings are called tenements, you see. And new buildings, bâtiments. After les bâtiments nouveaux. But 33A and 33B are not nouveaux. They're old. This one used to be 8 to 10 stories tall. A real high-rise by the standards of the last century. Built to mirror the skyscrapers across the bay in the Delta. That was before the war, of course. Mostly the urban middle class, I believe. This was once primo real estate, before the cannons lopped 4 or 5 stories off. Splat, splat.
You could be wrong, but from here it appears as if she's running the brush across her throat in a soaring motion.
Wonderful. The girl in the old lady rags looks like a sullen and rebellious member of a teen infraculture. Yes, you and I belong to the supraculture. We're common, the herd. The music on the radio, the food in the chain restaurant, those are all too popular for the girl in the old lady rags. She prefers a fantasy world, an infraculture with its own dress code and vernacular. It is an illusion, I'm afraid. There is no refuge from the supraculture. Young people who dye their hair funny colors and wear old people's clothes are stupid, and their little rebellion is self-defeating. All right, what next?
Suddenly, you're not so sure you're part of the supraculture. Of course, no time for silly infracultures. There are more pressing, reality-centric questions to be asked. What is all of this? The scent, the sound, the air.
What world? The only one, I suppose. The world of matter. And its pale antipode.
The camera of her mind glides over the surface of the water.
Great bodies of water. Forest-covered surfaces. Clusters of light where the cities lie. You've seen the montage. We all have. This world is enough.
It must be. This is the greatest and the kindest arrangement the atoms had in them. A frisson lifts the hair on the back of your arm. Wind sweeps the surface of the bay.
The world is a suzerainty of Revachol.
There is a term of endearment they coined for it, in the DeLorean century, when humanity was high on this world, discovering more and more of it, these archipelagos included. Elysium. Not in this case, no. That sounds more like something the Mesk petrofascists might say.
The Confederate Republic of Mesk, the world's largest state by territory, has fallen into an especially nihilistic strain of nationalism lately.
It isn't enough to call us animals. Even animals aren't animals. They're like you and I suppose. Living organisms don't identify with abstractions. Elysium is for particular beings. It does. There are those who would call it hell. A term of hatred that originates, like many such things, with the Mesk petrofascists. Oh, you want a picture of the world? There is no complete set yet, dear. They're having some trouble reaching orbit. Great things are difficult to achieve. For now, we're viewing the world from the inside, sideways. That's looking less and less likely, Detective. You wouldn't know it from the tabloids, but the ORG nations have been launching weather balloons into the lower ionosphere since the 30s.
ORG, Occident Revachol Grad.
There's a steadily increasing trickle of images. Between the big three, they're piecing together a dark grey corona. Yes. Pale covers 72% of the surface. There are grey flares and prominences, even arcs above entire isolas. The images are blurry, but if there was a sphere in there, it certainly looks like it fractured a long time ago.
A cold fear seeps into you.
You seem to be spooked. Please don't be. They say there is a rarefied envelope of matter surrounding the darkened disk of our planet. That is, if we are still living on a planet. Or, to speak more plainly, imagine vast swathes of land disrupted by nothingness. I am sorry, dear. It must sound quite terrifying through the acute encephalopathy. Even scientific positivism isn't entirely convinced about what we're dealing with here. But this is one of the greatest questions of our time. Maybe when they get the complete set together, it will jolt us out of our rut, bring us together, however naive it may sound. I don't know about things of that scale. My expertise lies in nations and trade routes, one or several layers below everything. But yes, we'll be fine. Don't worry.
She does not seem convinced that you'll be fine. If anything, she's realizing how deep your condition runs.
You may have mis'imagined it. I don't have the power to convey to you the effect and geometry of the images that depict our world from below low orbit. It's like the crowning of the world. It's insane. Very disco. You'd love it. See? Everyone finds something worth holding on to in this world, however wasted its opportunities.
The cold seeps into you. The air is heavy with 80% humidity. Suddenly, you're conscious of yourself standing there, on whatever this all is. Your arms hang down by your sides.
The Pale is not, technically speaking, part of reality. It is the opposite of reality. Okay. The Pale is the most dominant geological feature of the world, Detective. The separative tissue between the islas. It is the inter-islary mass. Isla is a Messinian word for a continent of matter, enveloped on all sides by the Pale. Also, isolation, or landmass. We used to believe there was only one. In the last 4 centuries, we have discovered 7. Windy, Seol, Samara, Ilmara, Grad, Katla, and this, Insulinde. An oceanic isla. It comprises mostly of water. Muindi is the largest, Katla the coldest, Insulinde the bluest. What can I say? Each is perishing and dear. Achromatic, odorless, featureless. The Pale is the enemy of matter and life. It is not like any other, or anything in the world. It is the transition state of being into nothingness.
The negation of being.
That's right. The negation of being. No, Detective. We're safe. It begins there, 6,000 kilometers to the north, and even more to the south, east, and west. You are in the middle of the Isla.
As your gaze instinctively turns north, a small black pit opens up in your stomach.
Yes. That is enough. Many cities are built much closer. An uproar of matter, darling. Rising into the Pale. Rolling. Evaporating even. A great vision. The area of transition between the world and the Pale is called porch collapse. Imagine a grey coronal mist, cold vapor marked by spores of an opportunistic microorganism. A mold that's adapted to grow at the edge of the unrest. It's the most disco thing you will ever see.
You hear your pulse rise. The air feels caustic and cold suddenly.
It's difficult to describe, or even measure. Something whose fundamental property is the suspension of properties. Physical, epistemological, linguistic. The further into Pale you travel, the steeper the degree of suspension. Right down to the mathematical. Numbers stop working. No one has yet passed the number barrier. It may be impossible.
There's a slippery article in there.
Pale when it's particular, this territory of Pale. The Pale when it's Pale in its entirety. Once you've seen it, language balks at the difference. Oh, it is so difficult for us.
A squall of birds. Hardware operating in the harbor. Firm. Self-evident.
It is possible to force dimensions on the Pale. In modern times, we can even compress its latitude, bouncing radio waves from one end to the other, shortening the path. But it is still hard for humans to navigate the Pale without getting lost, or having our minds damaged. Extensively. Some say the damage stems from extreme sensory deprivation. Others argue that Pale somehow consists of past information that's degrading, that its rarefied past not rarefied matter. They call it the blend over of the self. The Pale does not only suspend the laws of physics, but also the laws of psychology, maybe history even. The human mind becomes over-radiated by past.
Who says and who argues?
The logical positivists say, the dialectical materialists argue. It feels terrible. Absolutely terrible. International standards strictly limit civilian travelers to 6 days of Pale exposure per year.
It's more for her. Way more.
No, nameless detective of the Citizens Militia. I am a member of the Entropanetic Business Class. I'm cleared and trained for 22 days of Pale transit annually.
Perhaps that explains her strange pining after the revolution. Some degraded early memories.
Up to my gills, officer.
An acidic smile on her lips. It's getting worse every year.
Entropanetics is the scientific study of the Pale, or a recent iteration of it by way of Grad. The study of the Pale reaches back 6,000 years. The Pericarnassians called it the Western Plain.
They had not traveled the entire circumference of the Pericarnassian Super E-Solar. It was not merely in the west, it was everywhere, even then, surrounding them.
There are signs of pre-modern crossings. Successful navigation of the Pale relies not just on technical know-how, but intensive psychological preparation. Some of these tactics have been known for thousands of years. Nothing. We remain powerless before the Pale. The only real advance in Pale transit is the speed with which an aerostatic craft can pierce it. Less exposure leads to less effects later. Hybrid airships, Detective. Conventional rotors or jet engines no longer add velocity after the point of reference for motion is suspended, once you've crossed from near Pale to far Pale. In essence, we throw them in and they come out the other end. If we throw them precisely. Then they don't.
Gone, like a skipping stone beneath the surface.
The Pale outweighs reality 2 to 1. There is more Pale than there is matter, and the ratio is slipping. What do you think, Detective? Precisely. One of the few measurable effects of the Pale is that it is expanding at an unknown rate. An intuitive conclusion of that development is that one day the Pale will cover everything. But this sort of talk is mostly left to extremists. Most people, and indeed most private and government sector organizations, entire civilizations and religions even, find handy ways to ignore or downplay that knowledge. I suggest you do the same.
Off we go. You see the hanged man's mouth open.
One and all. They say Pale is death, but for the universe.
Why should we just leave, and the world get left behind?
Yes, sweet reality. But before we do, tell me, Detective, is this the first time you're hearing this? Do you really not remember anything? Then tell me, what do you think of the Pale?
Your ailing constitution, sweaty forehead, the beads there, and your heavy breathing.
You really didn't know. This does not spell good for the investigation, Detective. If you don't know even this, then... I hope so. I truly do. If I may suggest, hold on to your colleague, Kitsuragi. I ran a check on him and he is very competent. In the meanwhile...
Some of that assurance is meant for herself, as much as it's meant for you. She must have a lot on the line here.
You have me. I will assist you in any way I can, even if we have to do it one basic term at a time.